Hi, I'm Marty Nimko. Here are some things that I've changed my mind about, and some things that I haven't. Maybe you'll find it instructive, or at least it'll encourage you to inventory yourself. Here are some areas where I've changed. First, regarding pushiness. My New York City Jewish upbringing in the 50s venerated being aggressive, even bragging. But in today's world, especially outside of New York City, that's usually a turnoff. As an adult, it is hard to change long ossified values and habits, but I am trying. Higher education is overrated. I was raised to believe that education was the answer, but having taken a superdose of education, including a PhD specializing in evaluating education, and since then having been a consultant to many colleges, I am convinced that students' value received for the time and money is generally poor. I am a fan of the university's scientific research enterprise, but that, if anything, detracts from the students' experience. Students need to know the basics, not the cutting-edge esoterica, and they need to be taught by master teachers, which requires skills and interests different from those of the typical researchers. Unbridled capitalism is a net negative. My father triumphed over the Holocaust by being a small business owner, but by having viewed the world in fuller dimension over the years, I am now convinced that while socialism is net worse, unregulated capitalism is also bad. So here I've become a mushy moderate, a fan of moderately regulated capitalism. Arguing about politics with a fervent opponent. At least in part, it's because I argue too intensely. I've rarely been successful in changing people's mind about politics or economic issues, and in candor, I've rarely changed my own mind. So, my debates have generally generated more heat than light. So, especially today, when the 3 C's are ever more used, censure, censor, and cancel, I've started avoiding discussing politics or economics with people with fervidly opposing viewpoints. Attitude toward gays and lesbians. In the 50s, in blue-collar Queens, New York, where I grew up, that's Archie Bunker country, we weren't really aware of gay people, and we did call effeminate boys fags. I have completely changed my view, starting when my best friend in graduate school is a proudly and obviously gay guy. I have since met many gays and lesbians, and to the best of my knowledge, have no bias toward or against them. I judge them as individuals, I believe. Journalists and politicians are among the least trustworthy people. I grew up in the so-called Walter Cronkite era of journalism, where it was widely perceived that journalists did their best to present fairly, or at least most did. I venerated journalists, and indeed wrote for my college's newspaper. But now, advocacy journalism has become the norm, explicitly taught and encouraged in journalism schools. Too often, journalists have a heavy finger on the scale. Yes, I read the New York Times to get the hegemonic leftist positions and the Wall Street Journal to get what I perceive as moderate to conservative positions, but overall, I feel the media is trying to brainwash me leftward, and I believe that wisdom resides across the spectrum. I'm not alone in distrusting the media. The Gallup poll found that journalists are among the least trusted professionals alongside car salesmen, lawyers, and advertising practitioners. Antisemitism. My parents warned me that antisemitism remains pervasive. I didn't believe it, but now I do. For example, the media's disproportionate portrayal of Jews as crafty and money-hungry, the double standard by which Israel and other nations are judged, and reverse discrimination college selection and hiring, which reduces the number of Jews selected. Marriage. I have been with my wife for 50 years, 3 living in sin, as we used to call it, and 47 in official marriage. So you would think I'd be a believer in marriage. But today, especially with women's growing economic power, society's acceptance of single parenthood, the increased enmity between the sexes, and the 50% divorce rate, I have become skeptical of for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health till death do us part. Here are now some things where I haven't changed. First, in the work sphere, staying as a counselor. I have remained a career counselor for 30 plus years now. Why? I like to think I'm a better counselor for having worked with 6,000 clients. If I switched to something else, I'd be a newbie, and thus less effective. If I were starting over, I do think I would have become a neuroscience researcher studying the foundations of reasoning. Unwanted advice giving is often okay. By training and experience, I do think twice before giving unwanted advice, but perhaps because I'm impatient by nature, or am convinced that the advice is needed and wouldn't come from the other person, I do often tactfully offer advice. I temper the disempowering effect of that advice giving by ending with something like, just a thought, what do you think? In career counseling, only briefly do I consider issues regarding family and friends. Too much focus on those tend to diminish the person's self-efficacy and restrains their moving forward. That's because control really does lie mainly within the client, not their family and friends. So, my new client questionnaire does ask, what impact is family or friends having on your career? If he or she says it's significant, we will briefly discuss the extent to which they can and want to let that impact their current decision-making and their actions. But we focus on developing a goal, baby steps toward getting there, and overcoming any resistance, not family stuff. Focus on tweaks, not fundamental change. Yeah, some people transform their personalities, but usually, after much effort and often money, they fail, suffering declined efficacy and self-esteem in the process. Most of my clients have had more success by accepting their basic personality and putting them in situations that leverage that and that skirt their weaknesses. Focus on people with good potential to profit from your efforts. When I was starting out, I wanted to help what the New Testament calls the least among us, but found that I make a bigger difference working with people who aren't facing such major impediments. I believe I've made the most difference as a career coach to scientists. I have great respect for them, especially basic science researchers who try to unlock fundamental truths, knowing that applicability to real-world problems could take a long time. Contribution is more important than work-life balance. If I were fungible, for example, a mediocre bricklayer, but had a good personal life, I would aim for work-life balance. But I do believe I'm unusually helpful to my clients and my readers, and viewers of my YouTube videos. And so I do work 60 to 70 hours a week. This is Sunday night at 11:05 p.m. and I'm doing this. By most standards, I lack work-life balance. But while I'd have more fun spending hours of 40 to 70 each week not working, that would feel like a life less wisely led. The short story, the article, and the essay are the most underrated writing forms. We tend to venerate long-form writing, for example, the novel, or the nonfiction book, for example, a biography. But per minute of our time, which is the metric that should count, I find the short stories, so-called flash fiction, articles, and essays that come up high in a Google search to yield the most learning and or pleasure. Now some personal things I haven't changed my mind about. Having stopped being a sports fan. It used to be that a player, once signed with a pro team, stayed with the team. Then, despite already being rich, they started jumping from team to team just to get a few extra bucks. If the players aren't loyal to the team, how can they expect me to be? The only sports I now enjoy watching is lower level, that is Division III or Division IV high school basketball. The players are doing it for the love, not wearing a hairpiece. I did a dozen appearances on a daytime TV talk show. I was pretty bald, and the producer said he thought I would look great with a wig. And I did look good. He gave me one. I wore it on the street for one day and got female attention I had never gotten before, but it felt phony. It wasn't me. I know, people do all sorts of things to enhance their looks, but that wig still sits in my closet. I've only taken it out at parties to tell that story. Travel is overrated. The pleasures, especially with airplane travel, are outweighed by the pre- and post-trip hassles. And even the fun parts often turn out less fun than anticipated. I enjoy the occasional day trip, but get far more pleasure as well as productivity from my typical day at work and my evening of simple at-home pleasures. Materialism is shallow. Spending beyond basic middle-class standards yields little for the extra bucks and complication of life. I particularly feel that way about luxury cars that both cost more and spend more time in the shop and on the side of the road than does, for example, a Toyota or a Subaru. Choosing the mainstream over the luxury applies from housing to higher ed to home improvement. Because I spend modestly, I get and so appreciate the freedom to do the work I want to do with little regard to the income. Merit above all. Every group, from the fat to the ugly to the old, Jews to blacks to the Japanese, can claim victimhood and thus deserve preference in hiring, promotion, and college admission. But whatever justice that yields is dwarfed by the injustice not only to more meritorious candidates, but to coworkers and to all of us in the quality of everything from customer service to medical services. Atheism is correct, but I don't try to change the religious. I cannot begin to have faith in a deity that would allow earthquakes, terrorists, and cancer. But most religious people stay religious because they believe they benefit, so I do not try to disabuse them. Solohood is an under-considered option. We're told that we're social animals, and indeed coupling is the norm. Yet, at least across my 6,000 clients, my friends, my colleagues, I would estimate that the pool of the single is net happier. Yeah, they may date, but they're not intertwined, let alone married ostensibly for life. In sum, perhaps like most of us, I think I've wisely decided what to retain and what to change. But perhaps I've just been stubborn. In any event, might you find it instructive to list the things that you have retained and challenged? In any event, I welcome your thumbs up and accept your thumbs down. I always look forward to your comments, and especially like it if you hit the share button below. Share on your social media so that my efforts can have broader impact. And I am flattered if you choose to subscribe to my channel. And certainly I would welcome your checking out any of my 27 books. For example, How to Do Life. All my books are available on Amazon. In any event, I do thank you for watching. I am Marty Nemko.